We're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text number 65. So just a reminder, these verses are in reply to Arjuna's question about the Sthita Pragya. How does he sit, how does he walk, what is his language, how does he speak? And so text 64, we mentioned that Krishna is suggesting that a person adopt sadhana bhakti. The idea is to have a higher taste. Because one has a higher taste, he adopts a life that is regulated, regulates his senses and his activities. So, today's verse, text 65. Krishna emphasizes the importance of being satisfied in order to correctly perform sadhana bhakti. In order to attain success in sadhana bhakti. Many times the question is that well, there are a number of questions. One is that I'm getting up early in the morning, I'm going to Mangal Arati, I chant my rounds, I observe the 4 regulative principles, I do my devotional service. But I am not satisfied. Second one is, what is the goal? I have been doing it for a number of years. Am I right? These kind of questions are there. I've been doing it for years. I'm not sure where, is this it? I just carry on. But I'm getting old. I may not be able to do it. I'm getting sick. I may be in financial difficulties. I may not be able to. So these concerns are there. And one wonders, is it just blind faith that somehow or other it's all going to come together nicely? I don't know how. I'm not sure. But perhaps because I have some faith, I'm doing it. Krishna explains something that answers all these questions. Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanir asya upajayate prasanna chetaso hi ashu buddhi pari avatishtate. I just want you to notice that word buddhi pari avatishtate, because just a few verses back there was a line buddhi pranashyati. You remember that by contemplating the object of the senses, the ending was buddhi pranashyati. Intelligence is lost. So here, buddhi pari avatishtate. Buddhi, intelligence, becomes established. So in one process it becomes lost, here it becomes established. How does it become established? For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness. We could use the word in the process of sadhana bhakti of Krishna consciousness. The threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So, it's interesting that, remember we're comparing those two verses. Dhyayato Vishyan Punsa Sangasteshu Dhyayato, ending in Buddhi Pranashyati. And now we're looking at Buddhi Pariyavatishthati, right? So we're comparing. So what is the difference in the two? What's the key? What's the key element? The key element, Krishna says, is for one, thus satisfied. There is a requirement to be satisfied whilst performing sadhana bhakti. If you're doing sadhana bhakti but you're unsatisfied, you're unconvinced, unsure, then there's a problem. Whereas if you are satisfied, if you are convinced, if you are peaceful, prasanna cetasa is the word used. Then you get your buddhi pari avatishtati. Then, so this being satisfied, being happy, being pleased, is very important to sadhana bhakti. Sometimes we think sadhana bhakti is a matter of going through a certain discipline, just doing, just do it, almost like mindlessly just do it. Actually, you should not do it mindlessly. You should do it mindfully. Yeah? There's the word mindful and mindless. You have to do it consciously. You have to use your mind. Your mind should be there. Mind should not wander. The process of sadhana bhakti is ruined if your mind wanders. So if you have the question, well, sometimes my mind wanders, then you're not doing it properly. The mind should not wander. Then you see, you're counteracting the contemplation of the objects of the senses. You see, those are the two opposing forces here. One path begins with contemplating the object of senses. If your mind is wandering in doing sadhana bhakti, you will fall into that path. However, if you're satisfied, then you preempt, then you stop the possibility of contemplating on the objects of the senses. That's the secret here. And as a result of your mind being in the sadhana bhakti, in the process of Krishna consciousness, your buddhi is saved. Krishna says, very soon, ashu. You know, sometimes people think, well, I've been doing it for a number of years. Actually, it should not have gone on for a number of years. You should have, because Krishna is saying ashu. You could use the word today. Today you should feel the benefit. Not tomorrow. Immediate. It's interesting because if you think about it, in the early days of the Krishna consciousness movement, devotees used to do remarkable services very quickly. It wasn't mammoth. Yeah, great, humongous. Like leaving to a foreign country and doing what Srila Prabhupada did by leaving India to go to America. They did it, and they were only a matter of days, measured in days, when they began the Krishna consciousness. So this idea of years and years dragging on, something is wrong. We should have asked. It's a bit like going to a hospital to get cured, but you're in hospital for 10 years. Not right. Hospital means you're in, you're out. You're cured, you're done. No more. That's good. That's a good hospital that never sees you again. It's done its job. This is Krishna's understanding of sadhana. We have our understanding. Okay, here's Krishna. His understanding is Ashu. Very quickly. All the processes, and I don't want to dwell too much on this verse, but I wanted to lay this foundation because all the other verses coming, they fall into line on this pattern of thinking, that the intelligence becomes well established and very quickly, but it requires prasanna cetasa, happy-minded, very joyful, very peaceful, very satisfied. All those connotations are there. Actually, prasanna has some interesting words, meanings. One is soothed. When you're soothed. You know how when you are disturbed, somebody soothes you, somebody quietens you. Pleased, favorable, calm, and pure. So prasanna. So in all these meanings, your heart, your mind should be at peace. Should be not disturbed, not in anxiety. Okay. Now Srila Prabhupada's purport. I forgot to mention that also sarva dukkhanam hani asya upajayate. And very quickly, this process, if you adopt it properly, with a higher taste, remember the key word, with a higher taste. Sarva dukkhanam hani. All your troubles, all your sufferings, hani, are destroyed because of doing sadhana bhakti with a higher taste. You're not still supposed to be lamenting. You're not still supposed to be hurt. So now all of this is tied in with controlling the senses. And the other factor mentioned in this verse is, this is wherein Krishna's mercy is to be found. Prasad. This prasad. Krishna is describing his own prasad. My mercy comes when a person adopts this package that Krishna is giving us. He's giving us this package by which we control our senses, we get a higher taste, we adopt a regulated sadhana bhakti process, and we become peaceful while doing it. Then all our miseries, all our sufferings are over. Ashu, immediately. Krishna has this style of teaching. Oh, by the way, I think I mentioned last time that there's something special about this verse Prabhupada used to. Did anybody find out what it was? What's special about this verse? Jayadvaita Swami told me. He said, Hariram, do you know? Srila Prabhupada did not used to say Sharirara Vidyaja. He said he taught it to all his devotees. But when he took prasad, he said, Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanir asya upajayate prasanna cetasa yashu buddhi paryavatishtate, and he would eat. Just passing it on. But Jayadvaita Swami told me, I'm telling you. The Prabhupada used to do it. Interesting. I guess you could say it's an abbreviated form of Sharirara Vidyaja. Prayer. So, it's interesting because a devotee, he's not hackneyed, he's not stereotyped, he lives the process, so he is able to draw upon Sharirara Vidyajal, he is able to draw upon Prasada Sarva Dukkhana. He is always conscious of Krishna, one way or another. But in whichever way it is, it's very profound. It's not mechanical. It's deeply felt. Srila Prabhupada, he wouldn't say anything in a casual fashion when he quoted Shastra. Everything was like very alive, very meaningful. And so it's interesting. So what do we learn from this? It's not that next time they chant Sharirara Vidyajal in the Krishna hall, you say no. What we learn is that there are many ways to be Krishna conscious all the time. And there's a lot of variety, a lot of color, a lot of it's very attractive. Okay, so now, next verse, text 66. Krishna makes the point that this process of sadhana bhakti with a higher taste, which quickly establishes our intelligence, it also is the cause of experiencing peace. Everyone is looking for shanti. And Krishna says, this is how you get shanti. Nasti buddhi ayuktasya, na cha ayuktasya bhavana, na cha bhavayata shanti, ashantasya kuta sukham. Now remember, there's a key word here, ayuktasya, unengaged, not engaged in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada translates the word bhavana, if you look carefully, fixed mind, in brackets, in happiness, you see. So it's not just fixed mind, gritting your teeth and, not liking it, but you're fixing it anyway. No, in happiness, joyfully, naturally, very happily, a person who is properly engaged in Krishna consciousness. One who is not connected, not engaged with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? You understand, right? You have to have some elementary understanding of language. Here, Krishna is putting it in a negative form, that if you're not engaged in sadhana bhakti with a higher taste, happily, you can't have this buddhi pariyavatishtati, right? Because buddhi pariyavatishtati is connected to that. And you can't have that. You can't also have nacha bhavana, nor a steady mind. Now, if you don't have a steady mind, how can you have peace? And if you don't have peace, how can you be happy? So the point is, if you have transcendental intelligence, you can have a steady mind. If you have a steady mind, you can experience peace, and if you have peace, you can experience happiness. You see the point? That's basic language ability you have to know. Like when you go to school, you have to learn these things, the negative and the positive. So Krishna is saying both things. You can't have peace and happiness without transcendental intelligence. And the only way you'll get peace and happiness is if you have transcendental intelligence, which you can only have if you are yuktasya. It's talking about ayuktasya, one who is not connected. So therefore, who is yuktasya, who is connected, he can have a transcendental intelligence, a steady mind, he can be peaceful, then therefore happy. Peace and happiness are just not available without this. You can't have a mango without a mango tree. You just cannot have it. You have to have the mango tree. You have to have sadhana bhakti. with a higher taste. If you do, you will experience Ashu, not tomorrow, immediately. You'll experience prasanna chetasa. You become joyful. Okay. So just that interesting reading, right? Bhavana, steady mind. Now ask yourself, what is this steady mind? As against unsteady. What's steady? How's it steady? Is it going to fall over? What's steady? Steady means it's not searching for sense gratification. That's steady. It's not stopped searching, and it is not looking for any fresh opportunities. It's steady. It's done. It's finished. It doesn't care what is available. If it still cares, like sometimes people say, I'm not interested in doing business, right? But if you have a very, very special opportunity, tell me about it. In other words, not normal business. But if I can turn 1 rupee into 1,000 rupees, then tell me. If 1 rupee becomes 2 rupees, don't tell me. In other words, I'm still interested, but not this kind. Steady mind means I'm not interested at all. To use the language of Srila Prabhupada's purports, I'm not interested if Menaka comes knocking on my door. I will not be interested in somebody who's ugly, but if Menaka comes, okay, door is open. I'm not busy, I'm okay. No, you are not interested. That's called steady bhavana. And you can't have this unless you are yuktasya. You are engaged in Krishna consciousness and experiencing a higher taste. You will, in other words, it's unavoidable to be interested in sense gratification if you're not experiencing a higher taste. But if you are, there's a good chance you'll say, I'm not interested. Unless one is in Prabhupada, unless one is in the Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. In other words, it's saying that peace is something only a devotee can experience and nobody else. This is what it's saying. You're the few people on the planet who have the possibility of experiencing peace and nobody else. They do not, they're already excluded. So it is confirmed in the 5th chapter that, this is Bhaktaram, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only one can have real peace. Now I'd like you to think about this honestly. If you feel that you don't agree, please challenge me at the end of the class. That no, I know somebody who experiences peace, and he doesn't know about Krishna. If you feel you have a case, you're welcome to make it at the end. Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. That's an interesting choice of word here. There's a phrase here. Prabhupada is not just saying, well, therefore if one is not Krishna conscious, he cannot be peaceful. He says there cannot be a final goal for the mind. Now he's referring to that steady mind. Because a steady mind is a mind that has a final goal. It is steady because it's not searching. So think about that. In other words, you should feel you're at the end of your journey. When you come to Krishna consciousness, you're not on the process of self-realization. You're at the end of self-realization. This is where self-realization ends. Everyone else should be on the path, but in Krishna consciousness, it ends. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. Amazing, isn't it? Just amazing language, an amazing point. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. People are disturbed because they don't know what is their aim. I think we heard some lectures in the Gaur Purnim time from some devotees explaining how people, if you ask them on the street, what's your goal? What's your goal? People become stunned. They become perplexed. They don't know. They don't know the answer. They don't know what to say. I don't know what's my goal. So this is, Prabhupada says, disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. They don't know. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, have peace. That's what, because he now knows this is the goal. I know. He doesn't have any doubt. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna. So here you see Prabhupada's language. One is knowing that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, proprietor, and friend, and another is having a relationship with him. Prabhupada thinks they're both the same thing. Knowing Krishna means to have a relationship with Krishna. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress. Now you know what he's saying. If you're engaged in sadhana bhakti but you don't have a relationship with Krishna, you will be in distress. And you will not be peaceful. You know. In other words, who is engaged without, in other words, whatever you're doing, but you don't have a relationship. So now you remember I said there are all these questions that come up. Prabhuji, my mind wanders, this, all these things. Here's the answer. We're not having a relationship, therefore the mind wanders. Otherwise, it does not wander. Because every moment you're experiencing Krishna, and at every moment you're experiencing a high taste with Krishna. Prabhupada finishes the sentence by saying, however much he may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life. In other words, without having a genuine relationship with Krishna, everything we do amounts to making a show. We're just going through the motions. We're actually suffering quite a lot by doing this. You know, I mean, it's one thing for somebody to get up in the morning because he's joyful. It's another if somebody doesn't experience any joy and he gets up in the morning. That's quite severe punishment. I don't know if I told you this story, that there was, and this is a true story. It's in Los Angeles. A devotee joined and he learned about laws of karma. So one day he decided to go and give himself up at a police station. He said, I'm the person you've been looking for who did these crimes. Please punish me. Please, sir. He's in devotee clothes. They take him to the judge. They've never had somebody come voluntarily confess, you know. So he said, okay, so these are your charges. But before I punish you, what do you do? You're dressed like that. What do you do? What's every day? So he described, he gets up 4 o'clock in the morning, has a cold shower, attends arti, chants, does meditation, then goes out on the street distributing books and Harinam. You know, the judge said, whatever punishment I was going to give you was less than what you already did. You're already way beyond case dismissed, you know. So, you know, if you don't have a relationship with Krishna, it's severe punishment, what we're doing. You should have. And it becomes a show, kind of a mechanical thing, also without having a taste, having a relationship. Prabhupada says the last sentence very remarkable. And this should be like highlighted as much as you can possibly highlight anything. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. That's the one sentence answer to the whole purpose. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition. If I'm practicing Krishna consciousness, I'm not supposed to do something else in order to be peaceful. One of the ironies I came across, and this did quite shock me, was I learned some devotees were going for therapy in order to overcome some troubles in the mind to some persons outside. I couldn't understand this therapy for, psychiatric therapy to disturb mind. This process properly done is your therapy. It's not the goal of the therapy. The goal of the therapy is to develop love for Krishna, but it's a side effect. One of the side effects is that you naturally become peaceful. All your troubles go away. Sarva dukkha nam hanir asya upajayate. All of your dukkha, not some of your dukkha, sarva dukkha nam. Not leaving one out. All of them are eliminated. So it's a self-manifest peaceful condition. And the next part of Prabhupada's sentence was, which is achieved only in relationship with Krishna. In other words, if you don't have a relationship with Krishna, you can't expect this self-manifested peaceful condition. It's joined with that. The example would be, you can't have light if it's not plugged. You just kind of, in other words, how do you get light? Do you shine light on a light to give it light? No, you don't. It has to come from the light itself, from the bulb. You don't get light from above by shining light on the bulb. So these therapies, they're imposing a peaceful condition on you by some artificial means. Okay, breathe, slowly. Okay, so what happens when you stop breathing slowly? Immediately, disturbed again. It's all very artificial, superficial, and it does not go deep. Whereas Krishna consciousness touches the soul. Once the soul is peaceful, the intelligence is well situated, the mind is peaceful, the senses are controlled. You're peaceful. See, that's the hierarchy. Whereas if you try to make the senses temporarily peaceful, the mind is still disturbed. And that's what the wrong type of sadhana bhakti is. You're going through the motions, but your mind is wandering. Correct sadhana bhakti is your mind does not wander. Otherwise you're doing it wrong. One time I was asked the question, well, how do you hear the holy name when you're chanting? At that time I answered, how do you manage to chant without hearing the holy name? How do you actually do it? The only way you can chant is to hear. You have to hear. Don't rush. Don't go through the motions. Have a genuine experience of Krishna consciousness. Have an experience of Krishna. It's real. Krishna exists. Krishna reciprocates. And all these things come about. Not tomorrow. Shoot. Immediately. Okay, one more verse. Then by tomorrow we'll end the entire second chapter. 72, verse 72 will be the last. So now Krishna says, therefore, he goes back to he goes back to what he said. Where is it? In text 55. Text 54, Arjuna asked, how does he sit? How does he walk? How does he speak? What is his language? And Krishna's answer was, he controls his senses. Text 67. Indriyanam yicharata yat mano anuvidhiyate tat asya harati pragya vayur navam ivambasi. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So the intelligence is so very important to spiritual life. In other words, Krishna is worried. By the way, intelligence is synonymous for consciousness. In this second chapter, buddhi is the same as cetasa, same as consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So Krishna is saying that this sense gratification is such a dangerous thing that you don't need all your senses to be going crazy. Just one of them becomes attached to some sense object, your consciousness goes. Finished. And therefore, it's the most important consideration that one's consciousness is not ruined in some way. Therefore, oh, by the way, I just recently heard Prabhupada speaking very, very strongly. It was in, I'll tell you the reference in a while. He found out, it was in Mayapur, he found out his devotees were reading novels, fiction. And in the class, he was very strong. I'm so amazed. Prabhupada graphically portrayed all their experiences. The thought of a hero, romance. He described it all. Everything they're looking for in the novel. He said, but what will it do to you, your consciousness? You'll have another birth to fulfill the desire. It's a very powerful point. Don't think it's harmless. It always starts harmless. It's only oh Prabhu, you shouldn't be such a fanatic. Actually, the question of fanatic, I'll answer this. You should ask this at the end, but I'll answer it. What about being a fanatic? Would that be a question? Isn't there a danger of being a fanatic? Hands up if you think that would be a question. You'd like the answer. Would you like the answer to this question? Good. Who has an answer? Who has an answer? If somebody accuses you, oh Prabhu, you shouldn't be a fanatic. If you have an answer, I'd like to hear it. We'll give the mic to you now. Hands up if you have an answer. Okay, take the mic. Where's the mic? Right here.
Take the mic.
That's a very important point. This, because have you ever had this like in a subtle way or grossly said, oh you're fanatic. You should calm down.
Well, I haven't been. I don't have an answer for it, but I've been asked this question. That
okay. Who has an answer? Answer. Okay. You have an answer? No. Okay. All right, Mataji. Oh.
The fact that they're so disturbed that I'm a fanatic means that they're a fanatic.
Yeah, I know, but we need to give an answer.
You have to give an answer.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been
good. Yeah, it was a good turnaround. But Mataji behind you.
Maybe they're just being pretty stubborn.
Yeah, okay. Here's the answer. When you are doing Krishna conscious practices, because you have a relationship with Krishna, nothing that you do is fanaticism. Did you when you're doing it as a consequence of a relationship with Krishna, there is nothing fanatical about it. Fanatical is when you don't have a relationship and you are pretending to be a person who is Krishna's devotee. You don't have one. Then even the smallest thing you do could be called fanaticism. But if you have a genuine relationship, for example, obvious example, the original residents of Vrindavan. When Mother Yashoda sings Krishna's glories, thinks about him, is she being a fanatic? No. Because Krishna is her son. You see? So if you chant Krishna's name, you're not a fanatic because Krishna is your worshipable Lord. You are in a relationship with him. If you are not conscious of Krishna, that relationship, then everything that you do is almost pretentious. That's the answer. There is no fanaticism for a person who has a relationship. So Mataji is correct. They are being fanatic because they don't have one. You see? You're right. The other person is being fanatic because he doesn't have any relationship. But it doesn't mean you can't. Haridas Thakur, he wasn't being a fanatic. He had a relationship with Krishna. He wasn't doing it out of fanaticism. So, slight digression, but I wanted to address it. Important point. Okay, Prabhupada writes, unless all of the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, even one of them engaged in sense gratification can deviate the devotee from the path of transcendental advancement. See, the question is, okay, you don't have a relationship with Krishna. Really, there is no hope for you. Because you are subject to the whims of your senses. There is no hope. The only hope lies in having a relationship with Krishna. And if you don't have a relationship with Krishna, one of your senses, you don't even need 5 of your senses. One of your senses can get you into trouble. Anyone. So Prabhupada again refers to Maharaj Ambrish and the fact that all his senses were engaged in Krishna consciousness. And then he says, for that is the correct technique. That's the nice word, isn't it? Correct technique for controlling the mind. Just remember, this is process of sadhana bhakti being described by Lord Krishna. So he says, tasma, therefore, he began his discussion by saying, control the senses. Now, text 68, he ends it again. Tasma, therefore, yasya mahabaho nigritani sarvasha indriyani indriyarthebhya tasya pragya pratisthita. Therefore, O my beyond, one whose senses are restrained. The word is sarvasha, in every way, from their objects, is certainly of steady intelligence. So nigritani is a word that means, Prabhupada writes, curb down. It also means to hold down, to lower, to depress, to stop, to restrain, to tame, to punish, to overpower. So you have to do all these things, nigritani, in every single way, sarvasha, indriyani. In other words, you can't have even an itsy bitsy, little bit, completely shut down the senses from the sense objects. To have a steady mind, to have a steady intelligence, to have a steady Krishna consciousness. Otherwise it will be always flickering and vacillating and up and down. You know, sometimes some people say, oh, I've had a bad day. The senses got hold of me. I've had a good day. So this is the experience. Tasma. So Krishna is saying, therefore. I've said all these things, therefore, please Arjuna, make sure you are able to control your senses somehow or other, completely. And this way, maintain your Krishna consciousness, your steady consciousness. One can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, or engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed not by any human endeavor, but by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. See, the point is not the mechanics of, you have to be thinking, I'm doing it for the Lord. That's the key. Now, Prabhupada, last part of the purport, he speaks of the qualification of a candidate who is eligible for liberation. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. One who has understood this is called sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the qualification for doing sadhana bhakti. This is the qualification to understand that I have to be Krishna conscious. I have to use my intelligence in my Krishna conscious activity under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. So the remaining 3 verses we'll do tomorrow. Are there any questions?